Greetings, Guardians, my name is Bife here. So, I was originally going to do a video talking about the reveal of Act 2 and the stream that happened recently, but as it turns out, it was kind of light on narrative detail, so yeah, let's pivot and do a different video, namely one about Nezarec. It might have been a surprise to some that he would have reappeared in the story, but anyone who saw the writing on the wall would have been well aware of the possibility that he would have been returning from the moment that we defeated him upon the pyramid ship. I've touched on the topic a few times, but I now believe that Nezarec is about to prove himself to be a threat that will go beyond this episodic narrative and will be a persistent boogeyman on the horizon. And the reason for that is incredibly simple. You can't kill fear. So, let's start at the top. For those of you who don't know Nezarec, here's a lowdown. He was originally one of the disciples of the Witness, but his origin species isn't actually well known at all. He may be an entity of some terrible cosmic design, something that simply exists, or something that was created from some terrible moment at which a nexus of pain and torment arrived. Who knows? The point is, we have no idea where he comes from, and he is as a result rather terrifying. He is, however, seemingly meant to be a god, an embodiment of the very concepts of terror and pain. As far as his previous associations are concerned, it's clear that he absolutely has a strong involvement in the culture of the Scions, although I personally doubt that he is a Scion. There are too many biological factors that diverge when it comes to him. There are, however, moments where it's clear that he has twisted Scion society towards some kind of reverence of him in certain images and aspects that you can see. For example, Scion helmets look as though they are mimicking his head. Or Nezarec's Sin, the exotic warlock helmet that we held on to for years. Anyway, at a certain point in their history, they seemingly worshipped Nezarec as a so-called god thought. This worship was carried out through practices that can only be described as barbaric. People being carried away in the night after being visited by Nezarec's apparition, a terrible miasma of fear that permeated above them before they were forcibly removed and escorted to a place where they would be summarily executed, in body and, given that it's Scion's, potentially soul. We also know, thanks to the lore, that Nezarec has had a few moments where he's associated with humanity. Even back in the days of human history before the Golden Age, the cult of Nezarec seemingly existed, and they had a heavily guarded sacred text known as Of Hated Nezarec, a memento which has been passed from generation to generation. The cult of Nezarec survived the collapse, and has even persisted, presumably into this current era of destiny. Whether or not they're aware of the return and defeat of their patron entity is not known to us at this moment in time, but it seems that regardless, there's no reason to doubt that the cult persists. Our own interactions with Nezarec really started with the gathering of his relics by Mithrax and Ido during the Season of the Plunder. Mithrax would, at the end of the season, use these relics in a sort of ritual, distilling the essence of darkness from them, separating it from Nezarec's own corruption. The purified darkness was delivered to Saint and distilled into a remedy for the warlock Osiris, its mind-enhancing properties allowing Osiris to finally rouse himself from slumber and the coma that Savathun had left him in, as well as remembering a few of the memories that he had gleaned from his time within her capture. The corruption of the relics, on the other hand, appears to have been absorbed by Mithrax, and it appears to have begun to slowly overwhelm him as time goes on. The signs were subtle at first, but they have now become more and more pronounced, with Ido beginning to insist that he should take treatments of mass ether infusions so that he can survive long enough for her to find a remedy. After the Season of the Plunder, we of course encountered the influence of Nezarec on Neomuna as it was being invaded by Callus and the Witness's forces. Here, Nezarec was terrorizing the dreams of the citizens, turning them into nightmares, all of it in a bid to lure us to his pyramid ship where he resided. When we arrived, we had to face down an abominable version of the final god of pain, whose body had been regrown with the power of the light and the darkness. We did eventually succeed in casting him down, but after his death he reached out to us psychically. In those moments he reminded us that he would still be around to haunt us, and that he would still be with us even in our calmest moments. And realistically, I think this is the major question to which I have no answers in this video, but which we need to ponder, which is namely, Can you kill fear itself? And perhaps more to the point, is that what Nezarec really is? I think to understand all of this a little further, and to understand the thrust of the question, which is Nezarec's divinity, we need to understand that Nezarec's continued existence is a certainty, and we have provable evidence that that is the case. In those strange moments where we're talking with Mithrax, occasionally we can see the spirit of Nezarec within him, overwhelming him, forcing him into some strange and paranoid voice. But this isn't the only evidence that Nezarec has persisted beyond death, because of course the fact that we gathered his relics is proof that even before we killed him in Root of Nightmares, he had died once before. It's worth remembering that he was killed during the collapse at the hands of Savathun, the Witch Queen. Her betrayal and the battle that she conducted against him would have wrought about as much carnage against him as we were able to muster in our raid attempt. And yet, even with all of this, he still survived. His corpse was, well, a corpse, but the important thing is that Nezarec is less of a person and more of a presence. When he died at Savathun's hands, he was interred within the Lunar Pyramid, and though he physically died, he survived in spirit. And it appears that his presence wasn't confined to the pyramid either, and we know that because he was able to haunt the warlords on Earth, such as Briar. Furthermore, when the Fallen within Mithrax's mother's crew found the Lunar Pyramid and found Nezarec's body within, they carved it up into effigies. These effigies would one day become the relics that were recovered in the Season of the Plunder, but each of them would take on some of Nezarec's essence, and the corruption that was instilled within those effigies would pour forth and affect the Eliksni. This leads to Mithrax's darker past. All of this is to say that we've been shown the real degree of Nezarec's resilience, and seen that physical death as we might understand it is no barrier to his continued return, or even just his persistent presence within the universe. This brings me to the same question. If Nezarec is fear itself, can we kill fear? Or is fear as a concept within the universe immortal, immutable, indestructible? And if so, are there other examples within Destiny of beings that have tried or perhaps succeeded in becoming concepts of the universe, thus lending to the idea that that's actually possible? And the answer to that, unfortunately, is yes, there are beings that have tried, namely the Hive Gods. Xivu Arath has proven this in a much less complete degree than her siblings. Savathun and Oryx, on the other hand, have proven their power and their ability to become part of the laws of the universe in their own strange way, some with more success than others. Savathun's invention of the very concept of Imbaru, which lends her power as people stumble in ignorance, and her potential ascension into a higher reality, namely our own reality, as in one where we're not guardians and where we're players of the game, where she's broken the fourth wall. Yeah, all of that is perhaps proof of the idea that she as a god has truly embodied the concept of trickery. We can't be sure of her success, but it's dangerous to doubt that it is possible that she has succeeded. And as for Oryx, well, Oryx was the first person within Destiny's lore that really showed us that it is possible to turn one's self into an axiom. His conquest of the universe and his service to the sword logic led him to believe that he might ultimately become victory itself, that his ultimate victory was to become essentially the same as conquest, triumph, killing, and death. He wanted to become so successful in these rites that he was indistinguishable from them, that when one uttered the word of death, one also intrinsically thought of Oryx. When we first defeated him at his altar on the Dreadnought, we put those plans to the torch without much hesitation or delay, but we were the first in millions upon millions of years to do so. He might have been close had it not been for our intervention, and the power of a hive god, even a dead one, should not be doubted. It's something that we all need to think of when we next move to the Dreadnought in Heretic. So it's not at all impossible for a creature to become bonded to a metaphysical concept in Destiny. It is perhaps the strongest form of godhood that we've been able to see, despite the fact that there are definitely entities out there that have more raw power than any of the Hive Gods or Nezarec put together. Namely, of course, the Witness, the Traveler, and if they do exist, which I don't doubt at this point, the Winnower. Regardless, if this idea of becoming bonded to a metaphysical concept, or perhaps, as one might put it in other fictions, a divine domain, is something that registers for destiny, then Nezarec might just qualify for that particular form of godhood. And if he does, then it's entirely possible that as long as there is pain and suffering and fear in the universe, that he will continue to exist. His power might wax and wane depending on how much of it there is, but he might never truly be gone. If Nezarec is bound to a concept like this, then killing him permanently might be impossible. But there is a chance that Nezarec is a god in another sense, one that maybe makes him more vulnerable. So what is that version of godhood that renders Nezarec more vulnerable? Well, it's the thing that you see in a bunch of different fictions where a god is only a god because it's worshipped. In some instances, this grants them their power. In other instances, it is literally what grants them their entire ability to exist. And through all of this time, Nezarec has had worshippers. If not worshippers, then practitioners. If we're going to kill Nezarec permanently, maybe that means we need to scour all signs of him from the system, and in doing so, we need to destroy those who worship him. This would mean going after the cult of Nezarec, which to this day is still hidden somewhere on Earth, being led by Michael and potentially Nessa. If the memory or concept of the god in question needs to be scoured from the minds of everyone in question, though, that means that it's going to be even harder to excise Nezarec, because you would need to effectively excise the idea of fear, and that's not even to talk about the cultural imprint that Nezarec has left. There are individuals and entire civilizations that would need to have everything reformatted. I am of course thinking not just of humanity but also of the Scions. After all, Nezarec was one of their god thoughts. If he's able to persist simply because the Scions are able to hold him somewhat in their collective memory, then he may never truly die. This point of whether you can kill an idea or not pulls me back to one interesting anecdote from Mithrax himself, though, about an old terror that haunted the people of Reese. Take a listen to this. You probably know which one this is if you're really tuned in with the lore.
Reflecting on our victories, I am reminded of an Eliksni legend, one told by the scribes of House Judgment. Before the Great Machine, Eliksni were hounded by Skira, the Watcher, a shape-changer, manipulator.
Sabaton?
No, but similar. A demon of our past, defeated.
How?
Not with weapons or words, but with silence. Our fear and belief made Skira powerful. When we ceased being afraid, Skira ceased to be.
Word only that simple, Mithrax.
It isn't explicitly spelled out that Skira was a god, but the concept raised is an interesting one. Skira's supposed existence was tied to the continuation of the fear of the Eliksni people. Therefore, when they ceased to be afraid of it, Skira ceased. This might be a remedy to Nezarec in a certain sense. Perhaps hauntingly, if Nezarec was traveling ahead of the main pyramid fleet, he might actually have been Skira the Watcher, though this is some pretty heavy conjecture and there's no way of knowing that. All this is to say that right now we don't truly know how to defeat Nezarec, but this central question of can you defeat fear might be a part of that question of can you defeat Nezarec, and if so, well, we need to keep in mind all those possibilities. Killing an idea is impossible, but nullifying it might not be. And regardless of what happens with Nezarec in the grander scheme of things, for now all roads seem to converge on the idea that Mithrax will be involved, as Mithrax seemingly is host to Nezarec's influence. Unfortunately, the kill of the House of Light might not be long for this world. He might be the next to fall to the terrible wrath of the final god of pain, and if he does, it's not clear what happens next, or how we're supposed to put an end to Nezarec from that point. We Guardians are excellent at dealing with a variety of threats, but if you can't take it down with bullets, there's a bit of a problem there. If this is to be a war against fear itself, then it's a war that every single character in Destiny needs to fight individually, within their own souls and sinews as they attempt to prevent the final god of pain from finding purchase. And though fear might be an illusion, fear is a powerful illusion indeed, one that is not so easily broken. And, as we face new horrors and old horrors alike, Nezarec may persist regardless. But that's all from me for today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and keep in mind there will be more stuff on the channel soon. There's Monster Hunter content coming up. I will probably look more into Warhammer stuff, and I'll be looking more into more Destiny as Act 2 rolls back into action. But, as per usual, know that your viewership, as always, is quite enough for me. And that in the meantime, my name is Byf. Rodacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.